Hi, this is Melody with Summit Software. Today we will be looking at the AutoProxyGen tool, which is now available through our site. This tool automates the ProxyGen tool included with the SDK and incorporates some of the most frequent requests we've received for ProxyGen, like using it in a build event, automatically marking entry points and excluded items, and automating workarounds for bugs that are in ProxyGen. So first, let's take a look at the process of using ProxyGen. For this example, we will create the proxy and host type map providers for the Shape App Basics C# project. So our first step is to create the object model, and for this example, all we need to do is build it because it has a object model fairly well defined. Then we need to create the ProxyGen commands. So our first command is ProxyGen \l : and your host library that you'll be exposing. Get that here. And then you need to select or specify a file to work as your descriptor file, which is just describing your object model. Okay, so we have our first ProxyGen command. Now we go to our command prompt. We need to get to our ProxyGen tool. I have that set up with an environmental variable. And then run the command. Okay, we need to check for any errors or warnings. We didn't receive any. And we go back into our solution. We open up the descriptor file we just created. And then we need to locate the classes, which will be entry points. For us, that's just going to be the application class. I'm not sure where it is offhand. Here we go, application class. So we expand that out. We set its entry point attribute to true. And then one of the workarounds that you'll find in the online documentation for VSTA is to exclude all of your structs, which is not what happens by default. So find all of our structs, which are right here. Mark them all as excluded true. If you want more information on why we're excluding all of the structs, you can find that in the online documentation. I believe it's under the section on creating proxies. And to demonstrate another little problem that ProxyGen has, we're going to exclude the first property here, active drawing. Okay, so we have our descriptor file, we have marked an entry point, and we have excluded all of the necessary items. So we save this, and we then create our second ProxyGen command, which is going to be ProxyGen \I for input, get our descriptor file. Oops. And we need to tell it to create the proxy file, which will go back into our SDK sample, get the location of the proxy file, put it here, and we'll just go ahead and delete this so that we'll see that it is recreated. Okay, so now we need to run the second ProxyGen command. So we go back to our command prompt. We enter the command. Copy and pasting issue there. And we see that we got a warning about an interface and the graphics, so we'll need to add a couple of assemblies. No big deal. So we'll go into our proxy project for the sample and add that proxy we just created. And if you take a look at the timestamps here, you'll see that we also created the host type map provider file, which isn't really where we want it, but we'll deal with that later. So we add our proxy file in, we format it so it's a little easier to see. And then we make sure that our structs were excluded, our application is an entry point, the color struct, the size, and location structs are all gone, so that's fine. We have our application entry point, which is good, and we have our application class. Now let's look at that, and if you'll remember, we purposely excluded the active drawing property, which was the first property. So we'll take a look at what's in the application class, and you'll see there are no properties. Go back to the object model, you'll see that there are several properties which should be there, and they're all marked as excluded false. But there's a bug with ProxyGen, so unless you manually move your excluded property to the end of the type or properties list, all properties after it will be excluded, and that goes the same with methods and events as well. So not optimal. And then we need to take this host type map provider, which was included in the sample, and we want to get rid of that so that we can use the one that we just created. There's a little issue with getting rid of it through Visual Studio since it's set up as a shortcut. And remove that there. And we add the host type map provider that we just created with ProxyGen. So we have to go to the location where we created our proxy, and we'll find it there. And we are going to have one little problem with it because there is a namespace discrepancy now. So we can correct that just by changing the namespace to match our host. And okay, so the issue that we're seeing here is the interface for application, which is this iWindows handle. That's a property which was excluded because the first property was excluded. So we won't be able to compile the proxy without using that workaround. So again, not optimal. Alright, so let's take a step back and see what the problems were with this. Number one, it's a manual process that must be repeated anytime the host changes. Number two, there are bugs. And if a property, method, or event is excluded, then all following properties, methods, and events will be excluded. And also, to use the online documentation workaround for structs, you do have to manually exclude all of the structs. So obviously there's room for improvement here.